My name is Amanda, 32 years old, and I never thought I would have to fight my own mother for the house my grandfather left me. When I returned from a business trip to find new locks and my mom sneering at me through the door, my heart shattered. The property had been legally mine for less than a month. Her words still echo in my mind. You have nothing here. What she did not know was that I would stop her $590,000 sale and take back what was rightfully mine. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to hear how I reclaimed my inheritance from the person who should have protected it. My relationship with my grandfather Harold was the foundation of my life. He raised me after my mother Rebecca abandoned us when I was just 7 years old. Mom had always been restless, leaving for new relationships whenever she got bored. She would disappear for months, sometimes years, only to reappear when she needed money or a place to stay. Grandpa never turned her away despite how she treated him, but he made sure I understood what real love and commitment meant. Our home was a beautiful Victorian-style, 3-bedroom house with original hardwood floors and a garden that Grandpa tended religiously. He taught me how to care for the roses he planted for Grandma Elaine after she passed. That garden became our special place where we would talk about life, my future, and the family history that the house represented. The property was worth approximately $590,000 based on recent sales in our neighborhood, but to us it was priceless. In his final months, I took a leave of absence from my marketing job to care for him. His cancer progressed quickly, but we made the most of our time together. We would sit in his study surrounded by books and photographs, and he would tell me stories about his youth, his time in the military, and how he met Grandma. I recorded some of these conversations knowing they would become treasures after he was gone. When Grandpa passed, I was devastated. The funeral was small but meaningful, with neighbors and friends sharing stories about the kind man who had touched so many lives. My mother attended, showing uncharacteristic emotion. I thought perhaps losing her father had finally helped her understand the importance of family. A week after the funeral, we gathered for the reading of the will. Grandpa had been meticulous in his planning. He left his vintage car collection to his brother Thomas, his savings to be split between various charities, and the house specifically to me. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, explained that Grandpa wanted me to have the stability and connection to family history that the house represented. Amanda has been the heart of this home, Mr. Patterson read from Grandpa's letter. She deserves to continue building her life in a place filled with love and memories. When the reading finished, my mother hugged me. He made the right choice, she said. You took care of him when I could not. Her supportive reaction surprised me. She even offered to help with the paperwork and transition. I was grateful, thinking perhaps we could build a better relationship now. I shared my plans to renovate parts of the house while preserving Grandpa's study exactly as it was. She nodded and smiled, asking thoughtful questions about my ideas. Over the next few weeks, I began moving my belongings from my apartment into the house. Each room held memories: learning to bake cookies in the kitchen with Grandpa, the Christmas mornings by the fireplace, the summer afternoons reading on the porch swing. I felt his presence everywhere, comforting me in my grief. The neighbors welcomed me warmly. Mrs. Lawson from next door brought over her famous apple pie and shared stories about how Grandpa had helped her husband build their deck. Mr. Jenkins from across the street reminded me of the time Grandpa taught all the neighborhood kids how to fly kites in the park. These connections made me feel part of a community, something I had always valued. One afternoon, I discovered a box of old journals and photo albums in the attic. I spent hours looking through photographs of Grandpa as a young man, my grandmother in her wedding dress, and baby pictures of my mother. There were even a few rare photos of Mom holding me as an infant, looking happy and content before she left. I set these aside, thinking they might mean something to her. My mother visited occasionally, asking casual questions about the property value and the neighbors. She mentioned that her latest relationship had ended and she was staying with friends. Through family gossip from Uncle Thomas, I learned that she had significant financial problems. Apparently, she had developed a gambling habit over the past few years and owed money to several people. I felt sorry for her but was cautious about getting too involved. Our relationship had always been complicated by her unpredictability. Despite these concerns, I was hopeful about my new chapter. I had a secure job, a home with no mortgage, and plans for the future. I even scheduled contractors to update the bathroom and kitchen, careful to preserve the historic character of the house. Everything seemed to be falling into place. My marketing agency sent me to a conference in Chicago for a week. It was an important opportunity to network and learn about new industry trends. Before leaving, I asked my mother if she could check on the house, water the plants, and collect any mail. She agreed readily, seeming pleased to be trusted with the responsibility. "Take your time and enjoy the conference," she said. "Everything will be fine here." We spoke briefly every other day, with Mom assuring me all was well at home. She mentioned watering the garden and said the new mailman had delivered a package that she placed on my bed. I was grateful for her help and told her so. For once, it felt like we were building a normal mother-daughter relationship. The flight home was delayed and I arrived late in the evening, exhausted but happy to be back. As I walked up the familiar path to the front door, something felt different. The porch light was on, which was normal, but I noticed new curtains in the living room window. I did not remember ordering any curtains. When I put my key in the lock, it did not work. I tried again, jiggling it gently, thinking it might be stuck. Nothing. Confused, I rang the doorbell. After a long moment, the porch light flickered and my mother opened the door wearing Grandma Elaine's old bathrobe. "Rebecca," I said, still calling her by her first name as I had since she returned to my life as an adult. "What is going on? My key does not work." She stood in the doorway, blocking my entrance. Her expression was cold, almost smug. "I had the locks changed." "You what? Why would you do that without telling me?" "Your grandfather obviously made a mistake in his will," she said, her voice sharp. "This house should have gone to me. I am his daughter. You can continue renting your apartment." I stood there in shock, my suitcase still in hand. "What are you talking about? The house is legally mine. Grandpa wanted me to have it." "He always favored you," she snapped. "You were always the perfect granddaughter while I was the disappointment. Well, now it is my turn to have something good in my life." As we argued, I noticed movement behind her. A man appeared, someone I had never seen before. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with thinning hair and an expensive watch. "Is there a problem, Becky?" he asked, placing his hand possessively on my mother's shoulder. "This is Gary," my mother said. "My boyfriend. He is helping me get settled in our new home." "Your new home?" I could not believe what I was hearing. "Mom, this is my house. Grandpa left it to me. The will was clear." "Wills can be contested," Gary interjected with the confidence of someone who thought he knew better. "And Rebecca has a strong case, as the direct descendant." I pulled out my phone, frantically scrolling to find the PDF of the will Mr. Patterson had sent me. "Look, it says right here. To my granddaughter Amanda Marie Wilson, I leave my home at 123 Maple Street, including all furnishings and personal property therein." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Papers can be changed." I tried to step past her into the house, but she blocked me physically. "You have nothing here," she said, her eyes cold. "Nothing." When I attempted again to enter, she actually pushed me backward, causing me to stumble down the porch step. I caught myself on the railings, stunned that she would get physical with me. "You need to leave, Gary," said, his tone threatening. "Or, we will call the police and report you for trespassing." "Trespassing? This is my house," I was nearly shouting, now aware that neighbors might be watching but beyond caring. "Not anymore," my mother said, and shut the door in my face. I stood there in disbelief, tears forming in my eyes. I tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I sent text messages that showed as delivered but received no response. Eventually, I had no choice but to get a rideshare back to my friend Stephanie's apartment, where I had been staying before moving into the house. That night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through social media and found that my mother had already posted pictures of her new home, showing rooms I recognized but with furniture rearranged. She had even posted about starting fresh and finally having a place to call my own. The comments were filled with congratulations from people who had no idea what she had done. The next day, I ran into Mrs. Lawson while trying to retrieve some clothes from the house. My mother refused to answer the door, but Mrs. Lawson was watering her flowers and called out to me. "Amanda, dear, your mother told us the good news about letting her move in. That is so generous of you, especially after everything with your grandfather." I was stunned. "Mrs. Lawson, that is not what happened. Grandpa left the house to me and she has locked me out." The confusion on her face was clear, but she told everyone in the neighborhood that you decided she needed it more than you did. She said you were happy in your apartment in the city. My hands shook as I realized how thoroughly my mother had manipulated the situation. Not only had she stolen my home, but she was also controlling the narrative, making herself the victim and me the villain if I fought back. Despite having the legal documents proving my ownership, I felt powerless. I did not know what to do next or who to turn to. Everything I owned was in that house, including irreplaceable mementos of my grandfather. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Stephanie's one-bedroom apartment became my temporary refuge. She cleared space in her closet for the few clothes I had with me and made up the couch with soft blankets and pillows. That first night I locked myself in her bathroom and sobbed until I could barely breathe. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it felt like losing my grandfather all over again. "She waited until I was out of town," I told Stephanie through tears. "She planned this. She pretended to be supportive while figuring out how to take everything from me." Stephanie held me as I cried, offering tissues and quiet support. "We will figure this out," she promised. "You have the legal documents. She cannot just steal a house." The next day, I began calling family members seeking support and advice. Most had already heard my mother's version of events, that I had generously allowed her to live in the house because I preferred my city apartment. Some, like my cousin Megan, expressed admiration for my selflessness. Others seemed confused by my distress. "But Becky said you two worked everything out," Aunt Patricia said. "She said you were happy with the arrangement." Only Uncle Thomas, Grandpa's brother, immediately recognized the deception. "Your mother called me asking for a loan last month," he revealed. "Said she had gambling debts that needed to be paid right away. When I refused, she mentioned how valuable Harold's house was. I should have warned you." With his encouragement, I attempted to retrieve more of my belongings. I went to the house mid-morning, hoping to catch my mother in a reasonable mood. Instead, Gary answered the door, physically blocking the entrance. "Rebecca is not available," he said flatly, "and we have already packed up your things for donation. You should have picked them up sooner." Donation. "Those are my clothes, my personal items." I tried to look past him into the house. "You have no right to touch my things." "We have every right," Gary countered. "This property belongs to Rebecca now. Anything left behind is abandoned." I saw red. "Nothing was abandoned. You changed the locks while I was away for a week. That is illegal." He simply closed the door, leaving me on the porch again. Through the window, I could see my mother watching from the living room, not even bothering to come to the door herself. Desperate for help, I reached out to my college friend Jessica, who worked in real estate law. We met for coffee, and I brought every document related to the house: the will, property tax statements, utility bills I had put in my name, everything. Jessica reviewed them carefully. "Amanda, this is clear-cut. The house is legally yours. Your name is on the deed. Your grandfather's will is properly executed and filed with the county. What your mother is doing is not just wrong, it is criminal." "Then why does it feel like I cannot do anything about it?" "Because she is counting on your emotional hesitation," Jessica explained. "She knows you will struggle to take legal action against your own mother, but that is exactly what you need to do." As we were talking, Jessica's phone chimed with an email notification. She glanced at it, then looked up at me with concern. "Amanda, is your house on Maple Street? 123 Maple." When I nodded, she turned her phone to show me a real estate listing. My house, my grandfather's house, was listed for sale at $590,000. The listing showed professionally staged photos of rooms I recognized, though some of Grandpa's furniture had been rearranged or removed. The description read, "Charming Victorian with original details, completely renovated kitchen, mature garden, motivated seller, price reduced for quick sale." "She cannot sell it," I whispered, the reality of the situation hitting me anew. "She does not own it." "According to this listing, it is already pending sale with earnest money deposited," Jessica said grimly. "Someone has made an offer." That evening, my phone exploded with messages from extended family. My cousin Diane wrote, So generous of you to let Aunt Becky sell the house and split the money, she told everyone at Sunday dinner. Uncle Robert texted, proud of you for sharing your inheritance with your mother. Harold would approve. The lies were spreading, creating a false reality where I had willingly given up my inheritance. I felt sick to my stomach. With Jessica's help, I began methodically collecting evidence. I gathered photos of the locked doors, screenshots of text messages between my mother and me, where she acknowledged the house was mine, and a notarized copy of the will. I also filed a police report about my belongings inside the house, though the officer warned me it might be treated as a civil matter rather than theft. Through Mrs. Lawson, who had become sympathetic to my situation after learning the truth, I discovered that my mother and Gary had been removing items from the house, including Grandpa's antique desk and the grandfather clock that had been in the Sialef family for generations. She had seen them loading furniture into a truck late at night. They said they were taking things to be restored, Mrs. Lawson reported. But it looked more like they were emptying the place. The stress took a physical toll. I could not sleep more than a few hours at a time, waking with anxiety attacks that left me gasping for breath. I lost weight as my appetite disappeared. Stephanie worried about me, constantly forcing me to eat at least one proper meal a day and accompanying me to appointments so I would not have to face things alone. The most devastating discovery came through another realtor friend who had access to the contract details. My mother had somehow forged my signature on preliminary paperwork claiming to have power of attorney. The sale was scheduled to close in less than a week, with the new owners planning immediate occupancy. She will be long gone with the money before anyone realizes what happened, Jessica warned. We need to act now. Then Mr. Jenkins, who lived across from the house, provided me with something invaluable: video from his doorbell camera showing my mother speaking to potential buyers on the front lawn. My daughter never wanted this old place. Her voice came clearly through the recording. Too many sad memories for her. She is happy to let me handle the sale. It was the final piece of evidence I needed to prove her deliberate deception. My heart broke all over again, hearing her so casually lie about me, about Grandpa, about everything the house meant. But beneath the pain, something else was forming: determination. The automated email from the county records office arrived on a Tuesday morning: notice of pending title transfer, 123 Maple Street. The sale was scheduled to close on Friday, just 3 days away. My entire body went cold as I realized how close I was to losing everything permanently. Through Jessica's realtor connections, I learned that my mother had already put a deposit on a luxury condo in Florida, using the pending sale proceeds as proof of funds. She and Gary planned to move immediately after closing, leaving the state and presumably any consequences behind. I drove to the house one last time, parking across the street. I needed to see it, to try one more time to reason with my mother before taking more drastic legal action. As I approached the door, I saw movement through the window. Both my mother and Gary were inside, packing boxes. I knocked firmly. After a long pause, my mother opened the door, looking annoyed. "What do you want now, Amanda? We are busy." "I want to talk about what you are doing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You cannot sell this house. It is not yours to sell." Gary appeared behind her. "We have been through this. The sale closes Friday, and then this is no longer your concern." "I have the legal documents proving the house is mine," I insisted. "The will, the deed, everything. What you are doing is fraud." My mother laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "Prove it. By the time you get a lawyer and file anything, we will be long gone." I noticed movement in the living room and peered past them. Someone was carefully wrapping Grandpa's military medals and photographs in bubble wrap. The shadow box containing his silver star, which had hung proudly in his study for decades, was already in a box. "Those are Grandpa's medals," I said, my voice rising. "You cannot take those." "Watch me," my mother replied coldly. "Everything in this house is mine now." "What about his car collection?" I asked, suddenly, realizing I had not seen the vintage Mustang or Thunderbird in the garage. A flicker of something, perhaps guilt, crossed my mother's face before she composed herself. "Already sold. Got a good price, too." The realization that she had already liquidated some of Grandpa's most treasured possessions hit me like a physical blow. As I stood there speechless, Gary stepped forward menacingly. You need to leave, now, or I will call the police. This is my property, I said, standing my ground. You are the trespassers. Not for long, my mother said with a smirk. Now get out of here before things get ugly. As they closed the door, I walked around to the side of the house, where I could see into the backyard through the gate. The garden Grandpa had tended so carefully was overgrown, the roses he had planted for Grandma wilting from neglect. Near the trash bins, I spotted something that made my heart stop: several of our family photo albums discarded like garbage. I returned to my car and sat there sobbing uncontrollably. Everything my grandfather had built, everything he had wanted to preserve for future generations, was being dismantled and sold off piece by piece. I felt like I was losing him all over again, watching his legacy disappear before my eyes. As I sat there crying, I scrolled through my phone gallery and found a photo of Grandpa and me in the garden, taken just months before he passed. His smile was weaker then, but his eyes still held that special light when he looked at me. I remembered what he said that day as we planted new bulbs for the spring he would not live to see. Always fight for what matters, Amanda, he had told me. Life will knock you down, but what defines you is how you get back up. Something shifted inside me at that moment. I had been reacting from a place of shock and hurt, allowing my mother to control the situation because I was emotionally overwhelmed. But Grandpa had raised me to be stronger than that. He had taught me to stand up for myself, to protect what mattered. I wiped my tears and called Jessica. I need the name of the best real estate attorney in the city. I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. Money is no object. Jessica recommended Sandra Lewis, a formidable attorney known for handling complex property disputes. I called her office immediately and was granted an emergency consultation the next morning due to the time-sensitive nature of my situation. Sandra's office was impressive, with views of the city skyline and walls lined with law books. She listened intently as I explained everything, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression serious. Miss Wilson, what your mother is attempting is textbook fraud, she said. Fortunately, you have excellent documentation and clear legal ownership. Unfortunately, we have very little time before the sale closes. What can we do? I asked. We need to file an emergency is pendens, a notice of pending litigation that will effectively freeze any property transaction, she explained. We will also contact the title company directly with proof of your inheritance and evidence of the fraud. No reputable title company will proceed with closing once they are aware of the situation. And if they try anyway, they would be liable, Sandra said firmly. Title insurance exists specifically to protect against fraudulent sales. Once we file our notice, proceeding would be professional suicide for them. She laid out the legal strategy, explaining each step and the potential outcomes. There would be costs, significant ones. Her retainer alone was $5,000, which would nearly deplete my savings. But compared to losing a $590,000 house and all of Grandpa's irreplaceable belongings, it was worth every penny. As I wrote the check, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. This was my mother I was taking legal action against. The same woman who had given birth to me, who despite her flaws and abandonment was still my only living parent. Part of me wondered if I should just let the house go, avoid the conflict, preserve whatever fragile relationship might still exist between us. Then I remembered Grandpa's words again. I remembered his careful planning to provide for me, his explicit wish that I have the family home. I remembered the love and care he had shown me throughout my life, standing in stark contrast to my mother's selfish actions. Let's do this, I told Sandra, signing the retainer agreement. My grandfather wanted me to have this house, and I am going to honor his wishes. As I left the office, I felt different. No longer a victim, but a fighter. I was reclaiming not just my property, but my power. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of legal activity. Sandra and her team worked with remarkable efficiency, preparing documents and filing them with the appropriate authorities. By Wednesday afternoon, we had filed an emergency lis pendens on the property, effectively placing a legal warning flag that would alert anyone searching the title that the property was subject to litigation. This puts the title company, the buyers, and their lender on notice, Sandra explained. It makes the property essentially unmarketable until the ownership dispute is resolved. We also sent formal letters to all parties involved, the real estate agents representing both sides, the title company handling the closing, the prospective buyers, and of course my mother and Gary. The letters outlined my legal ownership, included copies of the relevant documentation, and warned of potential legal consequences for proceeding with a fraudulent transaction. Sandra advised me to document everything meticulously going forward. Every phone call, every text message, every encounter. Record dates, times, and exactly what was said. This will be crucial if we end up in court. I filed a police report specifically addressing the identity theft and forgery aspects of what my mother had done. The detective assigned to the case took copies of the forged documents and compared them to my actual signature. He confirmed that they would investigate, though he warned that family fraud cases could be complicated to prosecute. By Thursday morning, the effects of our legal actions began to manifest. The title company contacted Sandra, confirming they had placed a hold on the transaction pending resolution of the ownership dispute. The listing agent called me directly, clearly distressed about her unwitting role in a potentially fraudulent sale. I had no idea, she insisted. Your mother provided what appeared to be valid documentation showing she had authority to sell. I would never knowingly participate in something illegal. The prospective buyers also reached out, understandably upset and confused. They were a young couple with 2 small children, excited about making the Victorian their family home. Learning that the woman selling the property might not actually own it was devastating to them. I felt terrible for their situation while maintaining firm boundaries about my ownership. My mother's reaction was predictable. First came the angry phone calls, which I let go to voicemail on Sandra's advice. "How dare you!" she screamed in one message. "After everything I have done for you, you ungrateful little brat." Then came the threatening texts. "You have no idea what you are doing. Gary knows people who can make your life very difficult. You will regret this." I forwarded each message to Sandra, without responding, building our case with every hostile communication. By Thursday afternoon, my mother's attorney, Michael Brennan, called. His initial tone was aggressive, suggesting that I was interfering with a legitimate transaction out of spite. "Your client is attempting to fraudulently sell property she does not own," Sandra responded coolly. "We have documented evidence of forgery, identity theft, and false statements to prospective buyers. I suggest you advise Miss Terrius Wilson of the potential criminal charges these actions could result in." The conversation ended with Michael suggesting a family meeting to resolve the situation. Sandra agreed to consider it, but made clear that any meeting would need to begin with acknowledgement of my legal ownership. Through further investigation, Sandra discovered something that explained my mother's desperate rush to sell. She had already taken a high-interest loan against the pending sale proceeds. She had borrowed $100,000 from a private lender using the house she did not own as collateral. The loan was due to be repaid from the closing funds with substantial penalties if the sale did not go through. "She is in a financial vice," Sandra explained, "which makes her both dangerous and potentially willing to negotiate." Gary left an angry voicemail that evening, his words slightly slurred as if he had been drinking. "You have ruined everything," he said. "We had plans for that money. Big plans. You will be sorry you messed with us." Sandra added this to our growing file of evidence, noting that it could be interpreted as a threat. An unexpected ally emerged the next day. Bernard Lewis, an old friend of my grandfather's from his military days, contacted me after hearing about the situation from Uncle Thomas. Bernard had been present when Grandpa updated his will the previous year and offered to provide a sworn statement about Grandpa's clear intentions to leave the house to me. "Harold was adamant about you having the family home," Bernard told me. "He specifically mentioned concerns about Rebecca trying to claim it and took extra legal steps to prevent that. I would be happy to testify if needed." With Bernard's statement added to our documentation, Sandra requested an emergency hearing with the probate court. Given the evidence of potential fraud and the imminent sale date, the judge granted us a preliminary hearing for Friday morning, just hours before the scheduled closing. In the courtroom, I saw my mother for the first time since our confrontation at the house. She sat beside Michael, looking both angry and somehow smaller than I remembered. Gary was conspicuously absent. She refused to meet my eyes as the judge entered. Judge Martinez reviewed our documentation carefully, asking pointed questions about the chain of events. When presented with the forged power of attorney document and the evidence that my mother had already sold some of Grandpa's property, her expression grew severe. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a temporary injunction preventing any sale or transfer of the property at 123 Maple Street until ownership can be fully determined, she announced. Additionally, I am ordering that no further removal of personal property from the premises take place during this period. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time since finding myself locked out, I had won a round in this battle. The house would not be sold out from under me tomorrow. As we left the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. Beyond the anger, I saw something else: fear. "This is just the beginning," Sandra cautioned as we walked to her car. "But it is a good beginning. We have stopped the immediate threat and established a strong legal position." Back at her office, we strategized for the next phase. Sandra filed additional documents formally contesting any claim my mother might make to the property and requesting a full hearing where all evidence could be presented. She also advised me to prepare for potential escalation. "Your mother is in a desperate financial situation," she reminded me. "People do unpredictable things when cornered. Keep your guard up." That evening, alone in Stephanie's apartment while she was out on a date, I allowed myself to really breathe for the first time in weeks. The house was not sold. The legal system had recognized my claim. I was fighting back, and it was working. I opened my laptop and looked at photos of the house, remembering all the small details that made it home. The chipped corner of the kitchen counter where Grandpa had dropped a cast iron pan. The height markings on the doorframe of my childhood bedroom tracking my growth year by year. The rose bushes that had been planted for each generation of our family. "I am coming home, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room. "I promise." Monday morning brought another unexpected development. Michael Brennan, my mother's attorney, called Sandra repeatedly, his tone shifting dramatically from the aggressive stance he had taken previously. "We need to talk," he said when she finally took his call. "My client is open to discussing a resolution." Sandra invited him to her office that afternoon, advising me to be present but to let her do the talking. When Michael arrived, he looked harried and uncomfortable. "The situation has changed," he began without preamble. "Miss Wilson, Rebecca that is willing to acknowledge Amanda's ownership of the property if certain conditions can be met." Sandra leaned forward. "What conditions?" "Financial consideration," Michael said vaguely, "and assurance that no criminal charges will be pursued." "Your client attempted to fraudulently sell property worth nearly $600,000, Sandra replied coolly. "She forged documents, removed valuable personal property, and has caused my client significant emotional and financial distress. What exactly does she think she is in a position to demand?" Michael shifted uncomfortably. "She has financial obligations that were to be satisfied from the sale proceeds. If those cannot be addressed, she faces serious consequences." "That sounds very much like her problem, not Amanda's," Sandra observed. Perhaps Michael conceded, but family is family. She hoped Amanda might consider helping given their relationship. I could not contain myself any longer. Relationship. She locked me out of my own home. She threw away family photos and sold Grandpa's cars. What kind of relationship is that? Sandra placed a calming hand on my arm before addressing Michael again. "Here are our terms. Your client will immediately provide all keys to the property, remove herself and any associates from the premises, and return any personal property that has been removed. She will sign a statement acknowledging Amanda's legal ownership and waiving any claim to the property. In return, Amanda will consider not pursuing criminal charges for the forgery and fraud." "That offers my client nothing," Michael protested. "It offers her a chance to avoid criminal prosecution," Sandra countered. "Given the evidence we have collected, that is extraordinarily generous." The negotiation continued for nearly 2 hours. Eventually, a framework was established. My mother would vacate the property within 48 hours and provide a full inventory of items removed. In exchange, I would not immediately press criminal charges, though I reserved the right to do so if the agreement was not honored. As Michael was leaving, he paused at the door. For what it is worth, I advised against this course of action from the beginning. Some clients do not listen to counsel. 2 days later, we had our court date for the final determination of ownership. The evidence was overwhelming: the properly executed will, the deed in my name, testimony from Grandpa's lawyer who had drafted the will, and statements from several witnesses, including Bernard and Uncle Thomas, about Grandpa's clear intentions. My mother's case, by contrast, rested on flimsy claims that Grandpa had verbally promised her the house, and that as his daughter she had a natural right to inherit. When pressed by the judge, she could not provide any evidence to support these claims. Judge Martinez's ruling was definitive. The court finds that Amanda Marie Wilson is the legal owner of the property at 123 Maple Street, with full rights and privileges thereto. Any claims to the contrary by Rebecca Wilson are without merit and are hereby dismissed. The judge also granted a court order for immediate return of the property with police escort if necessary. Given the evidence of unauthorized entry lock changing and removal of personal property, the court finds this extraordinary measure appropriate. The next morning, I met Sandra, a locksmith, and 2 police officers at the house. My heart pounded as we approached the front door. Would my mother comply with the court order, or would we face another confrontation? When we knocked, there was a long pause before the door opened. My mother stood there, her appearance shocking me. She looked like she had aged years in just days, her face drawn, and her hair unkempt. Behind her, I could see boxes packed and stacked in the entryway. "The police," she said bitterly. "You brought the police to your own mother." "Miss Wilson," one of the officers said firmly, "we have a court order for you to vacate this property immediately. Are you prepared to comply, or will we need to remove you?" For a moment I thought she might resist, but then her shoulders slumped. "Fine, I just need to get my things." As we entered, I was struck by the state of the house. Some rooms were relatively untouched, while others had been dramatically altered. Grandpa's study, which I had planned to preserve exactly as it was, had been completely emptied, the walls repainted a garish yellow. "Where is all the furniture that was in here?" I asked, gesturing to the study. "Sold," my mother admitted flatly. "I needed the money." Gary emerged from upstairs carrying 2 suitcases. He glared at me but said nothing as he brushed past and headed out to a car parked in the driveway. "He is leaving you here?" I asked, surprised. My mother laughed a hollow sound. "He left me 2 days ago when it became clear there would be no money. Turns out he was only interested in what I could provide." Despite everything she had done, I felt a flicker of sympathy. My mother had always chosen men poorly, seeking validation in relationships that inevitably disappointed her. As the police supervised her gathering the last of her personal items, she suddenly turned to me. "You want to know why I did it? Why I took the house?" I nodded, wanting to understand. "He loved you more," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "My own father loved you more than he ever loved me. He gave you everything, his time, his attention, this house. Do you know what he gave me? Criticism and disappointment." "That is not true," I protested. "Grandpa loved you. He was heartbroken when you left." "He loved the idea of a daughter who would live up to his expectations," she countered. "I never could. But you were perfect. The perfect granddaughter who never let him down." Before I could respond, she continued, her voice hardening again. "I have gambling debts. Serious ones. People who will not take no for an answer. This house was my way out." "You could have asked for help," I said quietly. "Would you have given me $600,000? She asked with a bitter smile. "I doubt it." The officers indicated it was time for her to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at the house one last time. For a brief moment, I saw something like regret in her eyes. "I will not be coming back," she said. "This is goodbye, Amanda." And then she was gone. The locksmith changed all the locks immediately, providing me with new keys and installing a modern security system at Sandra's recommendation. The police officers took my statement about missing items for their report, advising me that recovering sold property could be complicated but not impossible. After everyone left, I stood alone in the empty entryway, keys in hand. The house was mine again, legally and physically, but it felt different, violated somehow. changed in ways I could not quite articulate. In the days that followed, I learned more about what had happened in my absence. The prospective buyers, upon learning the full story, had filed a complaint against my mother's realtor for failing to verify ownership properly. The district attorney was reviewing the evidence of forgery and fraud to determine whether criminal charges would be filed. Through various contacts, I discovered that my mother had indeed gambled away her retirement savings and had borrowed money from people connected to a local casino. Her desperation had been real, if not her justification for stealing my inheritance. As I walked through each room assessing the damage and missing items, I found myself struggling with conflicting emotions. Anger at what she had done, relief at having regained my home, sadness for the relationship that would likely never be repaired, and determination to restore what had been lost. Grandpa's medals, and most important papers, had been found in a safe deposit box rented in my mother's name. The vintage cars were indeed sold, but with Sandra's help I was able to track down the buyers and explain the situation. One, a collector who had purchased the Thunderbird, was sympathetic and offered to sell it back to me at his purchase price once he verified my story. I made the difficult decision not to press criminal charges against my mother, at least for now. Sandra advised me that I could always change my mind within the statute of limitations, but once filed, such charges would permanently alter any possibility of future reconciliation. "You do not need to decide today," she said gently. "Give yourself time to process everything that has happened." As a precaution, Sandra helped me file for a restraining order that would prevent my mother from approaching the property or contacting me directly. All communication would need to go through attorneys for the foreseeable future. "It is not about punishment," Sandra explained. "It is about creating clear boundaries and protecting yourself going forward." With the legal battles largely behind me, I could finally begin to think about healing both the house and myself. The process of reclaiming the house was both physical and emotional. Some damage was easily repaired: walls repainted, garden revitalized, new furniture purchased to replace what had been sold. I hired contractors to undo the hasty renovations. My mother and Gary had started restoring original features where possible and updating others with respect for the home's character. Other wounds were deeper and would take longer to heal. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Marshall, to work through the trauma of my mother's betrayal and the complex grief that had been interrupted by the property battle. In our sessions, I began to understand the generational patterns that had shaped both my mother and me. "Your grandfather raised you with stability and unconditional love," Dr. Marshall observed, "which is why you value home and family so deeply. Your mother was raised differently, perhaps with conditional approval, that taught her to take what she could when available." This perspective did not excuse what she had done, but it helped me contextualize it. My mother had always operated from a place of scarcity and insecurity, while Grandpa had taught me to approach life with generosity and purpose. Through connections in the antique community, I managed to recover some of the family items that had been sold. A local dealer recognized Grandpa's distinctive writing desk when I shared photos and helped me negotiate its return. The grandfather clock, unfortunately, had been sold to an out-of-state buyer and proved impossible to trace. For items that could not be recovered, I created alternatives. I could not get back all the family photos my mother had discarded, but I scanned and restored the ones I had saved digitally, creating new albums that preserved what remained of our visual history. In Grandpa's study, which had been completely emptied, I created a memorial space. I framed his military photos and the medals that had been recovered, placed his favorite books on new shelves, and positioned his reading chair by the window as it had been before. It was not exactly the same, but it honored his memory in a way that felt right. The legal aftermath continued for months. I established clear protections for the future, an updated will of my own, properly filed with multiple copies stored safely, a robust security system for the house, and legal documents clarifying ownership of all significant property. The question of whether to keep or sell the house was one I considered carefully. Now that it was securely mine, I could choose to sell it on my own terms and use the proceeds to start fresh somewhere without painful memories. Many friends suggested this might be healthier than remaining in a place where such betrayal had occurred. After much reflection, I decided to stay. This house represented not just Grandpa's legacy but generations of family history. The betrayal had happened here, yes, but so had countless moments of love and connection. By reclaiming the space, I was honoring all that had come before while creating something new. My mother made a few attempts at reconciliation through mutual family members. Aunt Patricia called to say Becky is really struggling. She feels terrible about what happened and wants to make amends. I maintained the boundaries my therapist had helped me establish. I am not ready for direct contact, I told Patricia. If she truly wants to make amends, she can start by acknowledging what she did and taking responsibility for her actions. No such acknowledgement came. Instead, I heard through family that she had moved to Arizona, started gambling addiction treatment, and was working as a receptionist in a small medical office. Part of me hoped she would find stability and peace, even as I recognized that our relationship might never be repaired. The experience transformed how I understood family. DNA creates biological connections, but true family is built on respect, support, and mutual care. Grandpa had been my real parent in all the ways that mattered. The friends who had stood by me during the crisis, especially Stephanie, who had opened her home without hesitation, were more family to me than my mother had ever been. I began hosting small gatherings in the renovated house, creating new traditions and memories. The first Thanksgiving after regaining the house, I invited Uncle Thomas, Bernard, Stephanie, Jessica, and Sandra, people who had supported me through the darkest time. As we sat around Grandpa's old dining table sharing stories and laughter, I felt his presence in the best possible way. The garden became my special project, just as it had been Grandpa's. I restored the roses he had planted for Grandma Elaine and added new varieties, creating a living timeline of our family. Each spring brought new growth, a reminder that healing and renewal were possible even after devastating loss. One morning, about a year after the court case, I found myself sitting in Grandpa's study, sunlight streaming through the windows. I held his old pocket watch, one of the few personal items that had remained safely in my possession throughout the ordeal. As I traced the engraved initials on its case, I realized I was finally at peace. The house was secure. My life was moving forward. I had protected what mattered, just as Grandpa had taught me to do. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it would not define me or my future. For those of you watching who may be facing your own family conflicts or inheritance issues, remember that proper legal documentation is essential, but so is trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. Stand up for what is rightfully yours, even when it means confronting people who should have protected you. Family should support your growth, not exploit your vulnerabilities. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have pressed criminal charges or chosen mercy as I did? Have you ever had to fight for an inheritance or property that was rightfully yours? Share your stories in the comments below and let me know if my experience resonated with you. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of overcoming adversity. Your support means everything as we build this community of people learning and growing through difficult experiences. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true family is defined by love and respect, not just by blood.